Hey, I'm Chris White with the American Battlefield Trust, and I'm standing in Guilford Courthouse National Military Park, where on March 15th, 1781, one of the largest battles of the American Revolution took place. We're standing along one of the three American lines. We're along the left flank of the American First Line. This area would have been held by North Carolinians, some Virginians, and others. Most famously, Light Horse Harry Lee would be down here with his troopers as well as light infantry. These men are going to start to fire into the flank of the British officers and men moving forward. This is going to draw some troops down into this area. One will be the 1st Guards Battalion, which is a very elite British unit who come down here to help protect the British flank. So as they come down into this area, they will start to skirmish off with Henry Lee's men. We'll also see some men from Hesse-Kassel. These are Hessian mercenaries. These are from the area of Germany today. Auxiliary troops are mercenary troops that will fight on this battlefield. They will help out the British throughout the American Revolution. So these men will actually keep pushing forward over top of the land we're standing. They'll go forward to the American Second Line, which we will visit. And as they go to the American Second Line, these men are dressed in blue coats, and they're going to seem like they look like Continental soldiers, American soldiers. So as some of the Virginians in a second line behind us start to look towards the south, as they start to see those Guards battalions start to get drawn off by Henry Lee, they'll start firing off in that direction. And here, marching right over top where we are, will be these Hessians. They'll go to the next American line, and as they'll get within about 30 yards of them, because these Americans think that, hey, those guys are dressed in blue just like our Continentals. They must be on our side. And they start cheering liberty, liberty, liberty. And a few moments later, the Hessians level their muskets and fire a devastating volley into the American flank. Eventually, this American flank will start to give way. And the American flank on the right side will start to give way. And the American First Line has fallen. The American Second Line falls. And it will fall back to an American Third Line, which is supposed to be the wall of Greene's army, consisting of Continental soldiers, the best and the brightest of Greene's army here at Guilford Courthouse. But not everything goes as planned for the British or for Nathaniel Greene. So we've moved down the Guilford Courthouse battlefield just a few hundred yards. We've been taking the driving tour road here through Guilford Courthouse National Military Park. You can check out their website. We have just passed their 240th anniversary of this battle that took place on March 15th of 1781. We're along the American Second Line. This would have been held by Virginians, commanded by Robert Lawson, north of the New Garden Road, and here by Edward Stevens. Stevens' men, who would be holding this area, will engage with the men of the Von Bose Regiment that we talked about. These Virginians will swing out face down to the south, and they will be the ones cheering liberty, liberty, liberty whenever they're fired upon by the Hessians. They'll also be distracted by the 1st Guards Battalion, who are moving off to the south. Today, if we pan over to my right-hand side, you'll see Forest Lawn Cemetery. So the battlefield's actually larger today. The American line would have gone down into that area, as would have Henry Lee's horsemen, as will Banastre Tarleton later on. So we'll have North Carolinians down there, Virginians, we'll have British officers, we'll have Germans. It'll be a mixed bag of what's taking place. But in this line, along the Americans had set up 3 defensive lines. 1st, 2nd, 3rd. We're along the 2nd one. And the idea is to slow down the British and be almost speed bumps as they come along, where they will eventually smash into that wall, which will be the 3rd American line held by the regular Continental troops. Now into this area will be commanded by Edward Stevens. Stevens had commanded troops at the Battle of Camden. Things did not go well there for him. So what he is going to do is set his men up in woods like this. This is an evolving battlefield. This is why you need to come out to a battlefield. If you were at the Hoskins farm in the morning on March 15th, 1781, you would have been overlooking 5 open fields. Those would give way to woods, much like we see here today. And then that would go backwards to the American Third Line, where you have 3 more open fields. So the Virginians in this area will have cover, and this will allow them to hold their line for anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes, depending on who you read. These men will come into action with, many of them with 26 cartridges in their cartridge boxes, and they will expend all of their ammunition. There's a story of a British sergeant who comes through here not even using his ramrod, just pouring the ball down in powder and ball into his muzzle, slamming it off the ground to seat the ball home, and firing to increase the rapidity of his fire. Now out here, Stevens, who I mentioned had a problem at the Battle of Camden in August of 1780, has put in this low ground, not too far from where we're standing, some selected sharpshooters. These men are to be back there in case his line gives way. They have orders to shoot the Virginians because he doesn't want to risk the fact of his men fleeing from the battlefield prematurely. Now, there may have been some friendly fire, not between the Virginia, but maybe between the North Carolinians who held the first line, who are retreating back into this area. There are some allegations of North Carolinians being accidentally shot by Virginians coming into this field, or into these woods. So the fight will be a stand-up battle for the next 30 to 45 minutes. What happens is it's a twofold action. The Von Bowes regiment will catch those unaware Americans in the flank, firing in closely because they were distracted by the Guards Battalion to the south. Up along the New Garden Road, we'll have the Guards Grenadiers, as well as the 2nd Guards Battalion, the 23rd Royal Welsh Fusiliers, and the 71st Highlanders move into that area. It'll turn into a melee. There'll be some hand-to-hand fighting up into that area potentially. Down into this area, Edward Stevens, whose line he's trying to hold, is going to be wounded. There's a monument up to him near Nathaniel Greene's monument. With his wounding and with the British starting to get the best of the center of the Virginia line and the left of the Virginia line, Stevens allows his men to start falling back to that third line, which will be the wall that Cornwallis has to crush himself against, hopefully for General Nathaniel Greene to win here at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. So we're standing along the American third line here at Guilford Courthouse National Military Park. To bring you back up to speed, what's happening here on March 15th, 1781, the American Army is deployed for action on the morning of March 15th. There's an engagement at a place called New Garden Meeting House between Bannister Tarleton and Light Horse Harry Lee. This will lead to 3 small skirmishes, and then the British Army will march down the New Garden Road towards Guilford Courthouse, which would have sat about 60 yards behind where we're standing, the original Guilford Courthouse. The Americans have deployed in 3 lines. 1, 2, 3. The idea is for the 1st and 2nd line to slow down those British soldiers. Those Americans will be North Carolinians in the front line, Virginians in the 2nd line. Now we're standing along the 3rd line. This is the wall, the brick wall that Nathaniel Greene hopes will stop the British advance. Now the British advance has been broken up. As we talked about at some other stops along the way, some of the British are being drawn down into what is Country Park today, as well as Forest Lawn Cemetery. So there's a little battle raging down to the south of us. Now, other British soldiers are being drawn in opposite directions because the Americans are some standing, some fleeing, and there are pockets of resistance out in front of us as the 2nd line falls back. Those Virginians, some of them have broken up into small groups and are trying to delay the British as much as possible. But to the north of us will be one regiment, the 33rd Regiment of Foot. This is Charles the Lord Cornwallis's regiment itself. The 33rd Regiment of Foot actually has the least resistance thus far, coming through the first 2 American lines. They will descend a valley and come down into a gully and start to ascend up along the ridge line where we are standing. As the 33rd does so, they have focused their target on 2 American cannon. The Americans have 4 cannon here at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. The British have 6. Now, the 2 guns here would have been commanded by Anthony Singleton. These 2 guns would have started off on the American first line. They would have fired between 35 to 40 rounds and fallen back to where we are. This is their new defensive position. The other 2 guns to the north of us will become prey for the 33rd Regiment of Foot, or will they? What the 33rd Regiment of Foot misses is the fact that Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware Continental soldiers, the best and brightest of General Greene's army, are deployed along this line. The Virginia Continentals will fire into the 33rd. Then the 1st Maryland will swing out forward and start to fire into the 33rd. As they do so, the 33rd realizes they are overmatched. They don't have any backup just yet. They fall back down through that gully to the far side of the gully where we're standing, and there they will wait for reinforcements from the 23rd Royal Welsh Fusiliers, as well as the 71st Fraser Highlanders. So now, up along this portion of the line, we're standing amongst the 2nd Maryland Continentals. The 2nd Maryland is actually in an L shape. Their pivot would have been somewhere near Singleton's guns where we're standing. Their line would run this way and then eventually back perpendicular to the main park road today. They're a new regiment. The Continentals are the best of the best for Greene's Army, but not, unfortunately, the 2nd Maryland. They're a relatively new unit who were recruited from all over the state of Maryland. Usually these units would come from small towns or cities and all know each other. The 2nd Maryland was recruited from all over. The 1st Maryland, who is to their right, is a veteran unit that is now consisting of the remnants of the old Delaware line and 7 other Maryland regiments that have now, or battalions, that have now been consolidated into one because they've taken such losses throughout the American Revolution. But when the 2nd Maryland arrives in Greene's Army, they have new officers. And the 1st Maryland, the reconstituted 1st Maryland, has a plethora of officers, as well as experienced officers. And they say, hey, we want that rank. We want to go into the 2nd Maryland. We'll take them over. And Nathaniel Greene says, I like that idea. Let's put veteran officers with these men. So when the 2nd Maryland enters this battle, they're with officers that they don't exactly know and perhaps don't trust. And the 2nd Maryland will start to engage with the best and brightest of the British Army. And that will be the 2nd Guards Battalion. The 2nd Guards Battalion will start to swing up and start to come for Singleton's guns. The 2nd Maryland tries to, under fire, move forward and deploy into one straight battle line, which is tough to do, even for a veteran regiment. They fire a volley. In the 2nd Maryland, the left of Greene's wall crumbles. They go pell-mell towards the rear, towards Nathaniel Greene, who's probably somewhere near Guilford Courthouse, 60 yards from us, and now Greene has a crisis moment. The 2nd Guards Battalion, the best and brightest of the British Army, now start to swing, and they start to go down towards the left flank of the 1st Maryland, the left rear, in fact. The 1st Maryland is unaware at this point. But along another road that ran through here, we had the New Garden Road, but we also had the Reedy Fork Road. The Reedy Fork Road led William Washington and about 80 legionnaires up into this area. William Washington's a cousin of George Washington, a big burly man and a very aggressive cavalry officer, a very good officer. And he is going to, at least for a few moments, charge into the guards. This will catch the attention of the 1st Maryland, who about face, or right about, and come right towards us. And now we have hand-to-hand combat. We have combat between horsemen and infantry, infantry and infantry. The bayonet is being used freely on this battlefield at this point. One of the officers, James Stewart, who is up in this area, who is leading the guards, will fall dead. Allegedly, his sword is found around 1866 on the battlefield, and he does have a monument not too far from where we're standing. Now, along this 3rd line, Cornwallis comes up. Cornwallis also has artillery. He has 2 guns. He is going to order them not to fire into the Guards Battalion. This is a myth of the battle that has been finally dispelled by Joshua Howard and Lawrence Babbitts in their fantastic book on the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. But there are going to be grape shot fired towards Washington's cavalry to try to break them up towards their horsemen, because they do need the help the Guards Battalion do. Now also coming online with the 23rd Royal Welsh Fusiliers, the Highlanders will start to arrive from the 71st Highlanders, and the 33rd Regiment of Foot will start pressing forward as well. Greene knows that the game is up. He knows that he has to keep his corps of Continentals together. That is something that George Washington, his mentor, had admonished him with. You have to keep your Continentals together. That is the core of your army. You can lose all your militia. You can't lose those Continentals. And what he is now going to do is start to pull off the battlefield here at Guilford Courthouse. Cornwallis wants to pursue, but he really can't. His army is exhausted. They are ill-supplied, and they've taken 28% casualties out here on this battlefield. Cornwallis decides to wait a few days, tend to both sides wounded, and then eventually move out towards Wilmington. At Wilmington, he had already set up a British garrison, which can supply him with food, forage, fodder, and he can use that for the naval projection of power that Great Britain has during the American Revolution, and that he can get on ships and go up and down the American coast. Unfortunately for Cornwallis, he chooses a place called Yorktown. But from here, Greene will chase, for at least a time, General Cornwallis towards Wilmington. He'll give up that idea and then turn to the south and head down to South Carolina, where he is going to start taking back the back country. The March 15th, 1781 battle at Guilford Courthouse was, by all accounts, a British victory. But it's a Pyrrhic victory here at Guilford Courthouse. 28% of Cornwallis's army fell, of those 1,900 men who entered action. While General Greene will lose more than 1,000 men after this battle due to either desertions, militia enlistments running out, or other aspects, General Greene is really the strategic victor because he has worn down Cornwallis from his move inland from Charleston up through the Carolinas, and now Cornwallis is cornered in Wilmington and will eventually find himself cornered at Yorktown. The American Third Line here at Guilford Courthouse is somewhat, I would say, controversial, only because we have some misinformation. Number one, Cornwallis, being this bloodthirsty man, will fire into his own men. That's not true. Luckily, that has now been dispelled. But we also didn't know where this third line was for a long time. The third line for a long time was thought to be a few hundred yards in front of where we're standing. Research has given way to what we now know as this being the third American line, held by Isaac Huger and Otho Holland Williams, two of the best officers in the Continental Army. Greene and his victory, or his defeat here at Guilford Courthouse, in a way is a victory for him, and a way a victory for the Americans. And some say the road to Yorktown started here at Guilford Courthouse. To paraphrase Nathaniel Greene, and really the entire Southern theater of the American Revolution for the Americans, he will say, "We fight, we get beat, we rise and fight again."